Welcome everyone to the Closing the Gap financial literacy series. Excuse me. Really appreciate everyone being here and joining us here today. This is something that's really important to myself, really important to all our panelists. Really want to take this time to thank our panelists and taking their time to be a part of this and be of such value for this incredible cause here today. I want to give you a little context of how we got to this place. I really started this conversation, or I should say collaborated with Emil Echior, president of InnoPower. We started this conversation way back in the summertime. We did a minority small business zone conference in which we were able to really engage the community, give some folks some opportunities that they otherwise wouldn't have. Credit to InnoPower and his entire staff and what the great work that they were able to do. Emil asked me to come on and facilitate one of the panels. It was really my pleasure to be a part of it, and I think it was phenomenal and some of the things that he was able to accomplish there. But we wanted to continue the conversation, see how we could sustain a true impact in the community and what we could do long term. So Emil and I have partnered with the Recorder, who obviously is streaming this live right now. Really want to thank Robert Shigog and his contributions and what he's been able to do for the entire Indianapolis community, and really providing a platform to where we can distribute these messages in a real positive manner. So having said that, we thought of what can we do to allow some access, some awareness, some education to the Black and Brown community, and otherwise just haven't been able to attain. So this is one of the things that we've really developed a passion to be a part of, something that we really look to continue to grow, continue to build, and it starts here today with this great group of panelists that I have here with me here today. So just give you some context on me and myself and my personal role. Again, Eddie Gill with Wise Financial of Northwestern Mutual. Want to really give a big shout out to Northwestern Mutual and Wise Financial for being a part of this as well. Really putting some backing behind it and showing their support for what they want to do in the community. Without further ado, I'll go on and introduce our panelists here, and we'll get into it. I'll start with Brian Kreider. Brian comes from a marketing background. I want to make sure I address everyone appropriately. He started as a marketing assistant, really got into auto racing. I thought he has an incredible story. I'll let him share a little bit more, but this position helped shape Brian as he had everything to learn about marketing and racing, plus empathize with a target market that didn't look like him nor relate to him. After stops in Daytona Beach and Charlotte, Brian returned to lead CSM ideation team in Indianapolis. At each stop, he built on his ability to collaborate with cross-functional teams and leverage this expertise for Fortune 500 brands with domestic and global sponsorships initiatives, including UPS, Jim Beam, Canadian Club, the United States Army, Toyota, Verizon, Farmers Insurance, Subway, and Levi Strauss. This extensive marketing background enables him to leverage his expertise, developing strategic marketing plans and unique digital content that enhance brand awareness. Without further ado, I'll let Brian kind of share a little bit more about his personal journey.
Thanks, Eddie. Thanks for allowing me to be a part of this. This is very important to me and our community. For me, I think where I can really add value to this conversation is, in the creative space, which I've been a part of. I really don't see a lot of Black and Brown people in leadership roles. So specifically, marketing heads and agency directors. So we're really trying to work on building our agency around inclusion to make sure that the income gap within our industry is kind of addressed. So we've been working with a lot of freelancers in the community and helping them look at themselves less as a freelancer, but more as a business, and how do they build their business acumen to really make sure that their value is met on their income. So I'm really looking forward to learn. I know that both Mike and Marshawn have tremendous value and expertise in this area. So as much as I can give, I'm really looking to learn. So I'm excited about this discussion.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate that and really appreciate you being here today. Next will be Frank Parker. Frank works with me here at Wise Financial, doing great work on the business operation sides of things. He has a long history and long resume of operating a number of different businesses, what it takes from a hiring standpoint, from a functionality standpoint. He's done great work here with Wise Financial. Without further ado, I'll let Frank add a little bit more context to he and his personal role.
Good. Thank you, Eddie. Again, Frank Parker, Director of Operations with Wise Financial Northwestern Mutual. Again, just really glad to be here, part of collaborating with these great gentlemen and folks that have helped put this together. Ultimately, about a year ago, just under a year ago, during the height of the racial unrest last spring and summer, a lot of our clients and members of our community working with us at Wise Financial really came to us basically asking, Mark Wise, who's our president and CEO, myself, Eddie, the remainder of the team for Wise Financial, to basically holding us to a call of action. With a lot going on last year with obviously the George Floyd situation. We're here primarily for our clients, for their financial lives, but ultimately we had to basically walk alongside them on this journey to basically pushing the needle forward. And Mark, myself, Eddie have done a lot to make promises and commitments to clients and our other members of the community to do what we can to basically move and amplify sort of our mission in regards to closing this gap and moving forward. Again, Eddie being part of our team, he's also the chairperson of our Diversity and Inclusion Board of Northwestern Mutual, Indiana, has really held us all accountable for keeping to commitments that we've made to our clients and our members of the community. I think for myself, being involved, obviously newer to the Indianapolis community, I want to do a lot of things that can help also push the needle personally, coming from the Boston, Massachusetts area, really new to the area. So I wanted to do my part to really push the needle forward. Now, as Eddie mentioned, having 15 years of basically operations experience where I've been in many ways employed to employ. And in a lot of ways, I've seen a lot of hiring practices in other businesses around the country. Some I agree with, some practices that obviously need some tweaking. But I think, my role with this group and overall is to help bridge that gap, obviously bring in a lot more Black and Brown members of community into the workforce in equal paying roles. I think it's really important as well. So that's kind of where I fit into this puzzle with this group of guys here. Obviously, the group that's helping put this Closing the Gap series together. Thanks, Eddie.
Frank, thank you. Thank you again for your participation. Moving on to Mike Green. Mike Green wears two hats at the same time. Under one hat, he serves as the chief economic strategist at the National Institute for Inclusive Competitiveness, aka the National Institute, where he helps guide the strategic alliance with a community of HBCU partners, Fortune 500 corporations, and national foundations towards an ambitious mission of increasing the productivity of America's populations by 1% GDP in one generation. Under the other hat, Mike co-founded Common Ground Conversations on Race in America with his wife, Emily. They influence societal change across the nation through transformative conversations and productive dialogue that leads to actionable steps in organizations, institutions, and communities. Really excited to have Mike a part of us. Mike, please feel free to share a little bit more.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you all inviting me here. I appreciate InnoPower and Emil. Let me start by saying that my role here and what I think I can add value to this conversation is by giving a broad overview and understanding of where we are today in this nation, economically and socially. But I want to give you a little bit of background. 10 years ago, I co-founded Scale Up Partners, a national consultancy with Jonathan Holyfield. Jonathan Holyfield is the former director of the White House Initiative on HBCUs. He's a former NFL player. He was a lawyer. He was in civil rights leadership. But Jonathan transferred over to economic development, and I came out of 20 years of media, New York Times, CNN, Dow Jones, and we both met up. I was an entrepreneur, tech entrepreneur. We both met up when I did a 4-part series for the Huffington Post called The Innovation Crisis in Black America. And I needed some experts, and I couldn't find anywhere in the country that knew anything about Black innovation and competitiveness. And Jonathan came under my radar, and we had a great time understanding and sharing. And we started a consultancy called Scale Up Partners to pioneer the ideology of inclusive competitiveness. Now, it's a simple concept. Economic competitiveness is the game. It's what has changed your skylines across the nation. It's what has built wealth and created the top competitive country in the world, $21 trillion GDP over the last 50, 60 years. But we haven't participated in that. We haven't been able to compete. And so the ideology of inclusion, diversity and inclusion is one thing, but competitiveness, I'm of the mindset that if you teach our children any game, not only can we play it, not only can we compete in it, but we can dominate, baby. And I'm gonna keep it real today. I'm be your icebreaker. We're gonna have a polite conversation, but I'm going to bring some data and some realness to this conversation, but I'm also gonna bring some solutions. So that's me.
Love it. Appreciate that, Mike. Really looking forward to hearing more. And last but absolutely not least, Indianapolis' own Marshawn Woolley. Black Onyx Management is his company, is Black-owned management consulting firm and public benefit corporation committed to helping organizations make a difference. Our team specializes in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and helps clients across all sectors develop top quality quantitative and qualitative research, training program, and project development, and strategic implementation to support civic renewal. Really excited to have Marshawn on. I did a little bit of research and I've stalked just about everybody on here, but love to see what Marshawn is doing here in the Indianapolis community. I think Indianapolis folks should really gravitate towards some of his endeavors, and I'll let you share a little bit more as we get ready to dive into conversations.
Thank you, Eddie. So I've been trained as a stratification economist, and I will have data that looks at both Indiana as well as Indianapolis that I think connects with some of the things that Mr. Green is going to be saying. But first, I have to recognize I am because we are. Emil Ekiyor, I met him during another work life experience, and watching him use his platform to help lift up Black businesses is something that my company is also attempted to emulate. And so I appreciate the work that he's been doing, and him being big brother and just kind of dragging me along a little bit. Then also I would be remiss if I didn't note that Robert Shagag with the Indianapolis Recorder has been very influential in the work that Black Onyx Management has done. He's used his platform to help lift up Black businesses by allowing us to take businesses that I'll talk about later on and feature them in the Indianapolis Recorder, which is one of the oldest Black-owned newspapers in the country. And so he's been a big brother as well, once again, using his platform. And so with the models of both Emil and Robert, what I've done is built another platform that not only raises up Black businesses. We know that around 40% of Black businesses were destroyed during COVID-19. And so we felt as Black Onyx Management, it was important to not only build a platform to tell the stories of Black businesses in our community, but then also to engage the local business community through a program we're calling Indy Accompliship. We're also going to be operating an entrepreneurship center later this year. So I'm looking forward to being a part of this discussion long term, and very pleased to be here.
Yeah, thank you for that, Marshawn. Really looking forward to it. I want to give this time just to say thank everyone for being here. Really appreciate Emil Ekiyor and InnoPower, his entire staff, for what they've been able to do, not only for with this particular town hall and moving forward, but what they've done here in recent past. They've done a great job there. Really want to thank Robert Shagag and his platform, the digital platform that he has in the Recorder, being able to push this out to the community. Really want to thank Wise Financial, Mark Wise, the president and CEO of Wise Financial, and Northwestern Mutual, Chris Johnlich, Sarah Gowdy, Kelly Burley, Frank Parker, all have been instrumental in really getting us to this place. So really want to thank them all. But without further ado, want to dive into the hard topics of what the wealth gap really is. And really in my business, as this wealth gap has continually grown and been more substantial, and the disparity is, the numbers are striking. And I think Mike and Marshawn are going to dive into some of those numbers, but we even see it here in our business, the number of Black and brown folks that are prepared and ready for retirement, as opposed to those in the white communities. The numbers are staggering. So we want to be able to provide some access, some resources for those folks in a number of different industries, a number of different ways, and this is definitely one of them. I'll turn it over to Brian for a moment. Really want to have Brian be able to share about how can we amplify some of these messages that we're talking about here today. How can we get these out to the general public? You mentioned in one of our kind of briefing calls the fact of defining words and what those words mean to different folks, and how we can really get these messages out in a real impactful way. Feel free to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think, obviously this is a great first step, and your commitment and Wise Financial's commitment, Northwestern Mutual's commitment is a great start. But as we saw, lag from the summer, a lot of the words just kind of fall off. And so I think that continued conversation is very important. And then I think, making sure that we understand as we project these words out, that there is a shared definition, and we can't just assume that everyone knows what we're talking about when we say gaps in income and gaps in wealth and all that, because it does seem like it's common sense, but I think it's really important for understand exactly what we're trying to tackle. Are we trying to tackle is education involved with that? Is it retirement? Is it income? Depending on the disparities between salaries, opportunities. So I think that it's really important for us to make sure that, we get really kind of specific on what we're looking at as it relates to whatever these topics are, so that we can really make sure that the audience is understanding exactly what we're talking about. And then we have those marching orders to kind of go through the process. I think, obviously, Mike and Marshawn will be able to give a lot of very specific examples of these stats, which are always important, right? Everyone wants to prove everything by stats, and it's great when we have that coming along beside it. But I think the other thing in my world, in the creative side, stories and human connections do drive a lot of these pieces, so that there isn't just a stat, there is a story behind it. There's real meaning behind it. And these are people that are in our community. So it's not just the stat that is a number that falls off of our memory. So I think, and then the way we do it is going to be important moving forward too. We have to meet people where they're at. Just thinking, a year ago at this time, I don't know, would this medium been as impactful, right? Were people tuning into Facebook Live? Our world has shifted, and it's going to continue to shift. So how do we keep meeting people where they're at? We gone are the days that you just put news on at 6 o'clock and everyone knows exactly, or you put something in the newspaper. So I think that we can't shoot with the kind of shotgun mentality. We have to get really specific on what are the messages and what channels are we putting them out, and making sure that there's dialogue too. There needs to be engagement. So a lot of people, social media is a very, very big platform for that. But it just needs to make sure that we're getting the right message to the right people at the right time. And that's really important.
That's great. One question for you, Brian, just from an entrepreneurship standpoint and being in the marketing field, you mentioned one of the things to us personally that, dealing with an industry where you're dealing with a lot of people that don't necessarily look like you. How does one navigate that space, and how do they get to a place where there's some ownership? I know Mike's going to touch on some ownership in terms of being able to compete and own some of your own personal, whether it's personal property, businesses, whatever it may be. That's where we can really change the game. But how do you navigate that space when you're talking about, in a space where, you're dealing with folks that don't necessarily look like you?
Yeah, I think it's really important. There's a difference between the hustle, right? The side hustles that we've kind of grown accustomed to make sure we get ours, to actually running and establishing a business, making sure that, all of your paperwork and everything is legit in business, so that you have the benefits, you have the tax benefits, you have all these other benefits of having a true business. And so I do believe that even though there aren't as many business owners who look like us, we also do have allies. I mean, there are people who are willing to mentor and to work with us along the way. I mean, we've all had people who didn't look like us who've helped us. And so I think that, making sure you understand, who your allies are, who are your mentors that you can get involved with. But I think the other thing too, and we have to be really, really intentional about this, is reaching back, sideways and finding the people who do look like us and helping them. Supporting is very important. Sometimes just talking general business. I know that I've seen a lot of people talk about how do we make entrepreneurship and business and ownership a dining room table conversation, right? So it's not so foreign. How can we create other networks that maybe we're not doing business specifically with other Black-owned businesses, but we're there for support. We're there to offer some resources that may come up. So I think it's just really being intentional and making sure that you're supporting on all different levels, and making sure that they understand that there's resources to kind of help navigate it can be overwhelming too. I mean, it can be daunting starting your own business.
Yeah, no, thank you. And you bring up a good point. We want to make sure that all the viewers understand and really utilize this platform to reach out to folks that are on these panels. We're here to be a resource. Access has not been as available in Black and brown communities as it should be. So we want to make sure we're able to make some of these different resources accessible, even if it's just a conversation and some consulting to some degree. I want to move on to Frank. Frank, I know you talked a lot about your hiring and the business practices and what those look like across different industries, across different businesses. What has been your experience, and maybe provide some different context or some solutions that we could potentially do moving forward to make sure we try to even this out.
Eddie, and then before I jump into that, as a part of this series and this session today, we would like to encourage folks to share some dialogue with us. There's a Q&A tab that's available. So if you guys have questions for the panelists, myself, Eddie, Brian, Mike, Marshawn, please feel free to share some questions. We will have some time throughout to answer some of those questions. And we do want to thank you guys all for joining today. So appreciate the attendance. So getting back to Eddie's question, again, as I mentioned, being sort of in a position the last 10, 15 years to employ others. I think, for me, it's really important that, when you're looking through resumes, you're meeting with folks via interviews. Number one, you want to make sure that folks are qualified. You want to make sure that they're educated. For me, sort of being in an operations role, in the case of this role as a director with Wise Financial, being able to bring people in that have great integrity, and then also being a great cultural fit. I think those are the core sort of pillars to any particular candidate, regardless of what they look like. I think ultimately, in this country, everyone wants to pursue, what's called the American dream. And I think when we think of that, it sounds great, but the reality is, that dream is sometimes harder for folks to catch. And I think, going in my experience of hiring folks, I don't look at race, religion, gender. I want to make sure that I have the most qualified candidates that I possibly can come in and help our team. I think on our prep call the other day, Brian said something that really stood out to me was that, his business, our business, I think a lot of businesses can benefit from having a diverse group of workforce. I think, the more diverse you are, the more ideas you can share, the more experience that you can bring to the table to make your organization, your company grow. And I think that was a really great point that he brought up the other day. The unfortunate part is, we, in a lot of different organizations, I've been there in other places where, you're competing with, quote unquote, the good old boys club in some cases. When I look at the NFL, for example, with, some of the issues that they have to basically incentivize teams to hire people of color into prominent roles, GM roles, president roles, head coach roles. And it's kind of it doesn't seem right that you have to incentivize someone to hire someone that's a diverse candidate. So again, for me, I look at a resume. If you're qualified, you're educated, you are willing to work, you have great integrity. That's all that really matters at the end of the day. Again, as Brian mentioned, being diverse candidate, and in a lot of cases can help. I think, when we look at how the hiring practices are today, a lot of times, obviously, we have equal opportunity employers out there, which is great. But for an employee, me being a candidate, I never want to feel like I'm someone that's just being a box checked off. Well, we've hired someone that's a person of color. We're checking that box. I want to make sure that I'm qualified and I'm available and I'm willing to work, and I'm hired based on my ability, based on my education, based on my beliefs, and not just based on how I look like. So I think, it is a great step in the right direction, but I think, we have to look far beyond, let's just hire someone that's brown or black or a male or female or someone that fits one of these particular boxes. I think we have to look a lot beyond that. So in my experience, it's always been about what's on paper, how you present yourselves, how you can benefit our team, regardless of what you look like and who you are. So I think as we talked about, the racial pay gap, we also could talk about the gender pay gap. There's tons of data. And again, on our pre-call, Mike really blew my mind with some not so surprising stats, but definitely opened our eyes as far as, how the data compares. And I think it's really important, Mike and Marshawn as well, to sort of amplify the statistics to help close that gap. Being aware, obviously there are still issues in this country that are out there, but seeing the numbers are definitely eye-opening, not surprising. And I think they're really, really going to be helpful as we go forward with this series.
Thank you, Frank. No, I appreciate that, and that's a good segue over to Mike. Obviously, you mentioned he has a lot of different data points that we talked in our pre-call, and I think those are important. But we also want to make sure that as we get towards the end of this discussion, we want to be able to provide some of those actionable steps in terms of changing this, in terms of even it out. We're not trying to take anything from any one sector or group of people or anything like that. We're just trying to give back some access and some resources to folks that just haven't had those resources. So without further ado, Mike Green, please.
Well, I appreciate that. What I'd like to do, if I could, is share my screen just to give you a sense of how we can level set this conversation around some data. So let me see if I can share my screen here. And there we go. So let me put this in full view mode and let's get started here. Can you see my screen? Okay, fantastic. So let's start with something that we haven't taught any of our kids, and that is about the economy and the 4 different industrial revolutions that we've gone through. The 19th century agrarian economy was the first revolution. The 20th century manufacturing economy, this is what was driving the wealth of this nation. And we didn't own the means of production at that time. And now we went from the 20th century manufacturing economy into a tech-based economy that pulled us into the 21st century. And now it's fueled by 4th industrial revolution, which is an increasing the pace of disruption, industry disruptions, and obsolescence. And we call that the innovation economy. So the challenge for us in these previous economies that we were boxed out of is, how do we get into the economy now? How do we play a role? How do we build prosperity? How do we engage in that American dream that we talked about? Well, the first step in that is to own some valued assets. And that includes land, homes, businesses, and intellectual property. Well, we haven't taught our youth, and no one taught us really, how to get into this game. Well, here's the overview. Here's where we are. If you look, we have most of our Black students in the worst schools that the richest nation on earth can afford. Our median wealth is at the bottom of the ladder. Our median household income is at the bottom. Our home ownership is where it was in the 1960s when Dr. King was decrying the segregation in schools, the discrimination in housing, and the discrimination in banking, which are the 3 issues of the Negro Revolution that none of us talk about because we weren't taught about it in our schools. But Dr. King wrote extensively about the Negro Revolution and what its 3 issues were. U.S. employer businesses, the Black-owned businesses represent 2%. 80% of all employer businesses are white-owned. 92% of GDP is produced by whites. Black-owned businesses, all 2.6 Black-owned businesses produce less than 1% GDP. That's 156 years after slavery. We're producing less than 1% GDP. We're really not competing in this game. And this game starts with STEM education and entrepreneurship. Those two attributes, our kids must, this is not a luxury, they must be educated with a core attribute of STEM education and entrepreneurship collectively as the key training ground. Here's where we are right now. 41% of Black businesses have closed during the pandemic. 58% are at risk. And we had all those problems that I just showed you as data points before COVID hit. So you can imagine where we are today. We're experiencing, the whole nation is in trouble. We're experiencing 4 existential challenges. The racial rancor is fueled by fear of rapid demographic shifts, and we all know that. There's a declining capacity to compete in the global arena, not just for Black folks, but for everybody. And so now that we have more Black and brown people in this country, and our schools have already flipped to a minority majority, we have to increase the productivity coming out of these innovative sectors that we've ignored for generations. This is an opportunity to increase the capacity of the people playing on the field for Team USA and increase our global competitiveness, which, by the way, went from #1 in the world in 2016. We're now #10, and we're going down. So we don't have any time to waste. Climate changes and the 4th industrial revolution are impacting industries, disrupting business models, but there's innovation occurring, and that innovation needs to be invested in. And of course, the COVID pandemic. So there's a pathway. It starts with STEM education. That leads us into high wage income. It also leads us into opportunities for high growth entrepreneurship. And we're talking of high growth entrepreneurship in growth sectors of the economy, of the regional economy. In Indianapolis, how many people can tell me what are the top 10 industry sectors? What are the top 10 growth sectors for the Indianapolis regional economy? Don't know. How many people can actually diagram the innovation economy in Indianapolis? Don't know. But if we're going to train economic athletes to compete on Team USA for the future, it's going to start with STEM education and entrepreneurship. It's going to put them into a place where they can earn high income and create scalable enterprises where that 2% of Black employers can grow to 3% or 4%. And that helps the United States overall, but it also helps us build generational wealth. And that's the pathway to equitable ownership. And equitable ownership is part of the American dream of prosperity. So I'll stop sharing my screen here.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Mike. I'll just go quick follow-up question. I think that's and powerful data that you just included there. The numbers jump off the page without a doubt. You mentioned STEM education. I guess two pieces. A, can you just define STEM education for all of our viewers there, make sure everyone knows exactly what we're talking about here. And then on top of it, it's a compounding issue here. You talked about the Black and brown students, they are in the worst schools. So how do we combat that? So define STEM, and then how do we combat just trying to give them some of those resources and access?
Okay, so STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math. And I'm throwing in the arts, because if you're talking about what Brian's talking about, marketing, you're going to have some creativity in there. And the arts is part of that. Design, engineering, all that's art. Your iPhone, that's art, baby. So no one can tell me that the arts are not important. They're vitally important. So it's STEAM education, really, for me. Science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And then there has to be an underpinning of entrepreneurship, critical thinking, problem solving, being able to identify opportunities for market-driven solutions and introduce those market-driven solutions into your local region. Entrepreneurship is key. Even if you're working for someone else, that's entrepreneurial attributes. The ability to think critically and problem solve inside of someone's shop makes you very valuable. Now, that being said, when we talk about schools, we know that we inherited. Nobody needs to feel guilty about what we inherited. We all inherited a segregationist society, a society that was built on segregationist policies and practices that protected white supremacy and oppressed the rest of us. We know we inherited that. Let's not feel guilty about it. Let's change it. So here's how we change it. First, we got to know how the game is played. The schools are funded at $736 billion annually. It is split between state and local taxes. The state puts in about 48% of that 736 billion, and the local folks put in about 47%. The federal government puts in about $60 billion. That's only 8%. Now you spread that across 50 states, 60 billion doesn't go a long way. That means you don't really have a voice. The federal government doesn't really have a voice at the table. So what do we know? We know that ubiquitously, all of these schools were built during segregation, during the segregationist era, redlining, all these. So our communities are segregated. Now, does that have to stay that way? No, we can change it. But in order for us to change it, we have to flip the script. Now we have to say, instead of me going to the real estate agent and saying, where are your best communities with your best schools, and they take me over to the white section of town, we can now flip the script by investing in our poorest quality schools and making them our best schools. So our most vulnerable populations that are our most needy populations, these are students, these are kids we're talking about, okay? Our most vulnerable populations should have our best, because that is their escape from poverty, right? That's their escape into equitable share of the American dream of prosperity is through the schools. So they should be our very best schools. Now, where can we invest? Well, see that 8% from federal government? No, that 60 billion could be 600 billion. It could match the total amount that the state and the locals are putting into schools. Never touch that, keep that going, but increase the federal government's part up to 600, 700 billion and narrowly targeted to the most vulnerable populations in the schools that are serving them and make those the very best schools. Why can't we do that? We could. We found $2 trillion in the couch cushions when we needed it, right?
Amen. No, I totally agree. And that's obviously a tall order for all of us. But I think Frank mentioned it earlier, with all the unrest over the summer for good reason. It opened a lot of eyes to things that have been going on for a number of different reasons. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we're headed in the right direction, but it's going to take all of us to continue to build on that momentum. Emil and I talked about this in some of our earlier conversations about providing that social capital for our communities that otherwise just have not been available. So I'll move on to Marshawn. He's going to bring it home here in Indianapolis. I know we have a lot of Indianapolis viewers here, and a lot of those data points that Mike Green was able to speak on nationally, definitely having that same impact here in Indianapolis.
So going back to what Brian talked about, I think, do a better job when we talk about the impact of racism from an economic perspective on the Black community. Citigroup Bank just did a study where they found that $16 trillion was the cost of racism on the U.S. economy. And when you start breaking that down, you look at what's happened with inequitable lending practices, that with Black entrepreneurs, that's 13 trillion there. You look at a $2.7 trillion income gap, just with folks going to work and not being paid what they should be paid. Bringing it home really to Indiana, one of the things we're really starting to appreciate is the devaluation of property. Even if you do own a home, too many of us do not own a home, which is really one of the sources of wealth when you're trying to pursue the American dream. It is, they use it to pay for college, use it to pay for businesses. Black home ownership in Indiana is ranked really around 36th in the country, appreciating the fact that Black home ownership isn't really that great in the first place at 44% nationally. And so when you start to see the biggest sources of the opportunities to gain wealth, and then you also deal with the issue of an achievement gap in Indianapolis, which is between, depending on if you talk to Savvy or if you're looking at the Federal Reserve of Chicago, between $20,000 to $30,000 between what Black median income is and what white median income is. And then you throw in, an education achievement gap in the Black community inside of Indiana. Over the last 20 to 30 years, the highest increase that Black subgroup has had on state standardized tests has been only 2 percentage points. Now, when you think about that, I want you to appreciate the reality that in Marion County, in Indianapolis, Marion County, 70 to 80% of Black youth fail the state standardized tests. We've changed our tests 3 or 4 times, but pretty consistently from middle school all the way through high school, 10th grade, you have young people, 70 to 80% people of color, Black kids in particular, failing the state standardized tests. Mike was talking about productivity. When he's talking about innovation in a knowledge-based economy or an innovation-based economy, economists generally think about that as productivity. And if you don't have the academic credentials to compete in this economy, you're just going to be less productive. That is the reality. And so we're looking at a situation where local community groups have talked about an economic death that's happened in our community. When you look at unemployment rates that are in the double digits for years. So the Black unemployment rate, for the most part, since we've been measuring it, has been in the double digits. So at least 10%. There's no official, definition for like depression level unemployment, but 10% for 20 or 30 years in communities across the country. In Indianapolis, more recently, between 2013 and 2017, the unemployment rate was in double digits, even when the economy was doing well. Indiana is special in the sense that even when in 2018, when the economy was really, really humming along, the state unemployment rate was around 3.5%. The white unemployment rate was at 3.1%, and the Black unemployment rate was at 5.4%. Those create problems. And so when folks show up to try to get a job with Frank, they don't have the skill sets even to take on the opportunity. And part of the challenge is we have to do a better job of telling that story, to helping people understand the difference between income, which is potentially your job. It could also be passive income from an LLC, from an asset that you owned. It could also be dividend income if you have that, versus liabilities and debt, so that we can even begin to talk about net worth. And so that's why financial advisors with Northwestern and Mutual and other financial services firms, their work is critically important in educating our community on the kinds of decisions we need to be making with, our finances, thinking about insurance, retirement, and then buying assets. I have 2 younger brothers, and I always enjoy telling them that you can buy something that actually makes you more money. They haven't quite. One of them is kind of getting into it. The other one, he's still kind of hesitant. But just the idea that you can buy something that makes you more money instead of buying something that depreciates. Those are the kind of conversations we need to be having, and actually sharing our stories, how we're succeeding, how we're failing, so folks don't make the same mistakes.
That's a great point there that you brought up there, Marshawn, and those numbers, again, staggering numbers throughout some of those data points. We have to be able to do something different to make a change and make a positive impact. I want to pause for a moment and make sure that everyone has an opportunity to get in touch with the folks that are involved in what we're doing here. Can everyone see that there? Can you guys see that there? Is that on there?
It is, Eddie. I think you may need to maximize your screen.
Okay, let's see here. Not sure. Did it not blow up?
It did not.
Let's try that again. Well, that's no good. See, can you try it on your end for me, Frank? But anyway, I wanted to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to contact the folks that are here on this panel to provide some of this information here. Because again, I think a lot of it starts with just education and understanding what our options are and how we can be better in terms of moving forward. Marshawn, if you don't mind, I want you to kind of just touch on a little bit what Black Onyx Management is doing here in Indianapolis. Maybe some of your programming, things that are available to the community, and things that you've seen positive in terms of what we're doing here.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier the models that both Robert Shigog with the Indianapolis Recorder and Emil Ekior with InnoPower have done as far as the idea of creating a platform and leveraging it. So what Black Onyx Management did really when we learned about the 41% of Black businesses that were going to be destroyed with COVID-19 is we created Black Businesses Matter. This is a program that focuses on Black businesses. It is free. We use this service to have power shifting conversations where we bring in business and government officials to help our businesses get access to information that they just don't have. And so part of that is just leveraging our social capital to help other businesses have access to additional social capital. We also provide business grants. We're not doing it like Emil is, but we provide business grants. And then the other thing that we're doing is we're actually engaging the larger business community in a program called India Accompliceship, where we, in our consultation and advocacy, we've did focus groups with the Black community. We did a survey, a community-wide survey that got over 1,700 responses from Black people. Imagine Black people filled out 1,700 Black people filled out a survey. Mike, I know you know how that can be a challenge. They said that they needed a business plan and they wanted a Black-led community development financing institution. So what we're doing with India Accompliceship is we've gone to local corporations and we said, we need you to work on your workplace, workforce, marketplace, and community. We're asking the tough questions, and these questions came out of our focus groups with the Black community. Questions like, have you done implicit bias training? What is your Black corporate, how many Black corporate board members do you have on your corporate board or even your nonprofit? What does your supplier diversity program look like? Do you have prime contractors as well as subcontractors? And then in the community space, are you supporting Black-led initiatives? We have several metrics under each area in the workplace, workforce, marketplace, and community. And we're inviting businesses to sign up. And what we're saying is allies make statements. We had a lot of Black Lives Matter statements from corporations. I think that probably happened nationally. We're saying, allies take action. And so our accomplices take action. And so the India Accompliceship Program is another example of that. We're also responsive to, you can't just collect data and not act on it. That's one of the things you cannot do in the Black community. You just lose credibility. So we're actually doing a feasibility study to look at the development of a Black-led community development financing institution. As a government institution, there are a variety of ways to do it on a for-profit or nonprofit side. From credit unions to banks to bank holding companies to funds. We're trying to figure out what's the best model for Indianapolis, as well as what do Black businesses need. And so when you think about the suite of things that we're doing, from having Black Businesses Matter to potentially having a Black-led CDFI, we're also going to be managing a entrepreneurship center with the Urban League, and we'll be, I'm sure we're going to be partnering with InnoPower and other folks in the community. We're really trying to take responsibility for our ecosystem. We don't claim to own the Black economic ecosystem, but we are going to try to do our best to leverage our social capital, the relationships we have, the knowledge and technical skills that we have to try to move that whole system forward. And so we'll be continuing to partner with the Recorder and others to try to move our community forward. We got a lot going on. We're also operating in the policy space. So yesterday I was at the General Assembly for like 5 hours trying to stop the bad stuff and get the good stuff. So sometimes it's just good to stop the bad stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Small victories.
Yep.
No, totally appreciate that. And clearly there's a lot going on, Black Onyx Management, a lot of programming going on, a lot of different initiatives. But you said something there, and I thought about this on my own and try to share to different folks when I'm having these conversations. You made the comment about Black folks filling out a survey, for example. Like, how fundamental is that and it's obviously you have something that you're trying to accomplish by attaining that information. But when I say we as a group, Black folks as a group sometimes have a problem trusting, right? And it's for good reason. You think back to the Tuskegee experiment. Some of us know about the Tuskegee experiment. Some of us don't. The ones that don't, look that up, and you'll see where some of this mistrust has come from. But we also have to be accountable for some of our own actions and some of our own mistrust, some of our own misdeeds. How do we encourage each other to take part in some of these, to even sit down with a person like myself or Frank, when you're talking about your finances and look at some of these tools that you can really prepare yourself for retirement? Sometimes it just revolves around, hey, I just don't trust this individual to do some of these different things. Frank or Mike, Brian, what are you guys' thoughts on how we can potentially, and Marshawn as well, continue to encourage each other to be, obviously you want to make sure you trust an individual, but you got to be open to those conversations. What are your thoughts, Mike?
I like the last word you said, conversations. The people in power, your people who control institutions of wealth and power and influence, have not had a real honest conversation with the marginalized groups, particularly the Black community. The messaging that we have received through the decades is not in my backyard. Your multifamily housing cannot be coexisting with my single family housing. Your wage cannot be the same as my wage. I mean, there's on and on and on. You go to a poor quality school, my kids go to a much better quality school. We live in two separate, unequal societies. Now, we didn't create that. The 1896 Supreme Court legitimately established that there are two Americas: one white, wealthy, and powerful, one poor and powerless. Now, that being said, we inherited that. We don't have to stay that way, but there needs to be a conversation. So your innovation ecosystem drivers, your institutions, anchor institutions, should be developing that conversation and inviting, actually going out and extending an outreach invitation to come and have a seat at the table, and let's have a conversation about visioning. What do we want Indianapolis to look like in 20 years? What does it look like now? Let's get some baseline conditions. Let's get some measures, and let's not sugarcoat it, because the people who are experiencing those problems, they know what the problems are. They may not have the data, but they doggone sure know what their problems are, and they doggone sure know what their kids' challenges are and what the opportunities that they're missing out on. So let's put some data on the table. Let's be honest about it. Let's have the conversation. Now, the other thing, there are two other things that I think would be instrumental. One is we always measure what we value, right? If I come to Indianapolis and I said, what percentage of your employers are Black-owned enterprises, Black-owned businesses in this city? Who can tell me that? We measure what we value. If we value something and we want to invest in scaling it up, we got to know where we're starting. And if we don't know where we're starting, it means we don't value it. It means it's marginalized. We don't care. Now, the second thing that is key, I already said communications. Now I'm saying we measure what we value. The third thing actually is plan. You guys know what it means. If we fail to plan, everybody knows the end of that. We plan to fail. Guess what? Racial equity in Indianapolis, I hear a lot of people talking about racial equity. At the National Institute for Inclusive Competitiveness, we define racial equity as the same way Mark Zuckerberg defines equity, the same way Mark Cuban defines equity, in the same way Jeff Bezos. Equity equals ownership, period. Now, I know I need equitable access to resources to get to ownership, but I need to be able to have that pathway. And there needs to be a plan by which to have that, to gain that pathway, equitable access to resources, leading to equitable ownership of land, homes, businesses, IP, that kind of thing, which leads to generational wealth, right? Okay, so if you have no plan, your institutional drivers, what's your racial equity plan? Your banks, what's your racial equity plan? Your real estate industry, what's your racial equity plan? And everybody really needs to come together. We call it the communities of influence. There are 8 of them. And every time we come to a city and we look at who's in the room, we look at who's not in the room. And so across those 8 communities of influence that we define, they should all be in the room when you create your racial equity plan and strategy that starts with equitable access to resources, ends with equitable ownership, and let's measure that over the course of the next 10 to 20 years. That's my thinking. What's yours?
If I could jump in real quick, go back to the thing about trust, and Marshawn's dealing this on the macro level. The meetings he's having this week is that macro level. Mine tend to be more on the micro level, where I'm having more one-on-one conversations, trying to look for individuals who are trying to figure out their business. And when we talk about trust, I think that there's the sense that I have to be very, very straight, honest. Like, where I've seen the biggest breakdown of trust, where I can get to a trusting relationship the quickest, is on LinkedIn and on Instagram, where I just reach out to the creators. And I'm just 100% honest with them, like, hey, you're doing some great stuff. What you're posting, really isn't going to make you money on the commercial side, right? So like all these small jobs that you're making and you're putting money in your pocket, you can't scale that up to the corporate side. So I'm just honest with them and say, I'm not trying to get in your pockets for money. I'm just trying to help you. And I think that the sooner you can just be honest and show a little bit of vulnerability, because I think Marshawn said another thing, we don't celebrate failures. And that's what innovation is all about, is failing fast and moving forward. And so as a business owner, I can't sit there and tell anyone that I have this all figured out. Like, I'm still learning every day. And there's been failures in my life. This is the second business I started, and the reason why is because my first one wasn't successful. So I think, talking to this young generation who are going to be our future, to let them understand that failing is not the end of the world. It's just it's a one step of moving this forward, and then being alongside them. That's where trust happens, right? Is when people do have those missteps, that you can still be there to support them. And again, not saying that you believe everything that they did was wrong, just to say, like, here, I'm still here to support you, right? And so I think that that's where we, from a trust perspective, we need to get better at, is being really intentional, being really straightforward with people, and then just being there to support along that whole journey. Because despite what you see on Instagram, success does not happen overnight.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brian. Frank, were you add something?
Yeah, I think back to your question, Eddie, how do we encourage folks to, sit down with people like, yourself, myself, other advisors on our team? I think it's just encouraging them to look in the mirror and really just be open to sitting down and having that conversation. I think growing up myself with a, single mom with me and my brothers, we had to try to make the best of what we had, and I think sitting down with an advisor such as yourself or other advisors with our team, we're here ultimately to help folks make the best of what they have, and then help them get, to access things they don't have and how to amplify that. I think, the one, for Black and Brown communities, the one thing that is really minimalized is our amount of access, as Mike said. How do we get access and provide access to those who don't have right now? I think, when you look at a race, we're not getting a head start. We're not, sometimes, in most cases, we're not even at the starting line. We're behind the starting line. So how do we get folks to that starting line? And how do we get, our, folks, Black, Brown communities to get ahead and broaden access for those folks? So I think just having an honest conversation, saying, hey, you don't have to have a lot to sit down with an advisor to help plan for your life and protect your, what you do have and help you get what you don't have. You just come and have honest conversations. So I think that's really important. It's just encouraging people to break down those barriers of untrust, or break down those barriers of potentially being shy about what they don't have, or if they don't have a whole lot. We're here to help regardless of what your situation is. Everyone's in a different place in life, and I think we're here to maximize, again, as I mentioned, what you currently have, and then again, hoping and helping out to push people forward to accessing things that they don't have. So I think that would be helpful as well.
Can I hop in here? So Marion County has 705 employee businesses, Black-owned employee businesses. We have around 18,500 Black businesses within the metropolitan statistical area. I know that because we're planning. Going back to what Mr. Green said, we're planning. We've been planning. We know that the major industries for the region include advanced manufacturing, health and life biosciences, and logistics, advanced logistics. We are in health and professional services and other low barrier to entry spaces. And we have to figure out how to scale up. When you're thinking about the technology jobs, there is a gap between the number of science degrees that we have, where Black people are getting science degrees, leaving and going someplace else because they can't find a job in the market here. And so when you start thinking about, I mention these things because if you're going to be trusted, I think you have to have the data. And when you start having the data and you can communicate the data and you act on the data, that's when you start, to see folks trust you. So now when I say that we're going to do a Black-led CDFI, the reason why folks are like, okay, well, maybe that might actually happen is because we did a community-wide survey, and when they said that we wanted a business plan for the community, we created Indie Accomplishment, and we went out and we created the things, and we were responsive to what the community said. When you start building that level of trust, I think that's when you can start introducing the idea of you need to have a financial planner that's going to help you write your will. Or you're going to need somebody to help you, figure out assets. Like what are your assets? How do you purchase more assets? And I think it's just that level of activity. And Mr. Green, when you were talking, I was thinking about, yes, our community went through a whole entire Black agenda process. We made the mayor's debate on a Black agenda and all that, like the last municipal election. But we maintain accountability by making sure that we're pushing forward a policy agenda that's both oriented at what city leaders can do, but also what we can do, because we can't let the city leaders have control of our agenda. We have to be able to do some things ourselves. And I just wanted to interject that.
I think I'd like for you to add, Marshawn, if you can, because you got a lot of great stuff going on, and I don't want the viewers to miss it. You mentioned the Black CDFI. Can you just establish and explain what that is, please?
So part of what happens nationally, between 80 to 20% of Black folks are unbanked. They don't have a relationship with the bank. And when you think about just how we use banks, we go in, get our money, take it out. We may not even stop to set up a business account. So our funds are commingling when we have, sole proprietorships and things of that nature. What happens then is if Black people don't have a solid relationship with a traditional bank, when they go in and get a loan, it's not going to happen because they won't even have the right information to do it. And in our study, what we've learned is the person sitting across from you in a branch may not even have the ability to tell you what you need. And so you deal with a situation where Black businesses in their founding year, only 1% of them can get a business loan versus white businesses can get 7%. They get business loans. So it's not a lot, but it's still 7 times the difference. What a CDFI does, if you can access them, is creates creative funding so that you can get financed when you are not bankable. In our local market, we probably need to do a better job with microloans. That's going to be loans between, $1,000 to like $25,000, because with Black businesses, you're a sole proprietor. You may not have the revenue yet to be able to take on actual debt, but you can take on a grant or you can take on a microloan. And so CDFIs can help with that. But then CDFIs also help with patient capital and being creative with their financing to do things like revenue-based financing, where if your organization is generating revenue, you can create a loan that is aligned with the revenue that you have, and so that you don't take on debt and really just destroy your business. Really, what a community development financing institution does is it creates the ability for you to get the financing until you're not until you're bankable. That means you can go into a traditional bank and get a loan. They Part of the challenge is traditional banks are going to compete with CDFIs. So what might happen, but there's also a collaborative relationship where a traditional bank, if they turn you down for a loan, if they, if they believe in you, they might refer you back to a CDFI. But for us, that doesn't always happen. And in order to even get access to a CDFI, to know that they exist, you got to have like an accountant or a lawyer who's aware of a CDFI to even get connected. So we're trying to create a Black-led CDFI to leverage our social capital in order to get through all that, because we know how to access our businesses. We know how to market to them. We know how to communicate with them and to let them know about the things that they don't know. And so that's the objective of CDFI.
Marshawn, that's powerful. that is amazing. I'll let you jump in, Frank. I just wanted to say that's good stuff. We can have sounds like 7 town halls on just CDFIs for business potential prospective business owners out there. But no, appreciate you sharing that for sure. And obviously we'll share some contact information. But Frank, jump in there.
Yeah, definitely, and I agree with your sentiment there, Eddie. I did see that we had some questions from our audience, so I want to get to a few of those. 2 really good questions. One from Kara. Kara, again, appreciate you attending today and joining us for this session. Her question is, I work at a diverse school here in Indianapolis, but we struggle to recruit and maintain a diverse staff. So she's looking for suggestions there. Also, how do schools better connect to our communities to share stories? So within the actual Q&A, I did see that Emil shared a helpful link at educateme.com to help with potentially in the recruiting space. I think for me, being in a role to hire and recruit, sometimes you have to take a proactive approach to seeking, certain candidates. I think a lot of times when for me specifically, when I post a role for a position with our team, I get a lot of resumes, and sometimes I'm looking for a little bit of a different candidate, and I will connect with our local schools through our internship program. I think sometimes you have to take sort of a proactive approach to really seek out if you're looking to diversify your staff. Sometimes folks are just either they don't believe they have access. I think inherently a lot of us in the Black and brown community just feel like we're always like I said before, behind the starting line. So they don't even apply for these particular roles. So I think having someone that's a proactive recruiter going out and reaching into the community to look for certain individuals will be helpful. As far as maintaining diverse staff, I think it's all about empowering your staff to grow, to be the masters of their particular area within your organization. I think when folks feel powerless in a role, it's not very motivating. They just feel like they're order takers, if you will. So I think it's good to nurture your talent. It's good to empower them to be the best they can in their roles, and it's also good to provide growth opportunities for them. I think a lot of folks don't want to feel like they're going to hit a ceiling and just be in that same role for years and years down the road. They may decide to go and look for other opportunities elsewhere. So I think just really empowering, nurturing your staff and helping them grow would be really helpful. And then the second part of the question, I may kick this to somebody else. How do schools better connect to communities to share stories? Anyone want to take that question?
Say work with the Indianapolis Recorder. I would leave that.
I want to address just the first part of the question, and then I'll toss in something on the second. But when she talked about diversifying her faculty, her staff, the HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, produce a significant percentage of Black teachers across the country. I know Jackson State University produces more than 50% of the teachers in Mississippi. And having a relationship with HBCUs gets you access to their alumni, gets you access to their colleges of education, and it gets you access to a pipeline of talent, serious talent that can be recruited to come to Indianapolis or anywhere in the country, actually. And with regard to the communication with the community, I do think that Black-owned media is definitely a way to go. But I think that the schools have to be proactive in creating maybe like a newsletter that can be student run, or it can be community run, or it can be a combination of both. Parent teacher organizations can create a newsletter, but actually keeping that conversation going, a podcast, now that we have podcasts availability to us. These are things that schools have to be proactive in ensuring that the issues that they have to deal with and the community is dealing with, those issues are dealt with on an ongoing basis in a very transparent way.
Good. Thanks, Mike. And then I have one other question. This is from Sharita. Again, thank you for Sharita for joining us today and being part of this session. Her question is, often I get intimidated by the thought of speaking with advisors because I've always thought individuals with deep pockets use those services. This question I'll kick to Eddie in a sec. What things can small growing businesses do to get these conversations started?
Yeah, I would say number one, that is one of those misnomers out there. A lot of times you think that, hey, I don't need an advisor because I'm not making millions of dollars. And I think Brian mentioned this early on in the discussion. You got to meet people where they are, and that is what we do. Meet people where they are. We don't just, and I can only speak for us in terms of what we do. And Mike mentioned earlier about having a plan. That's what we do. We establish a plan for folks wherever they may be in their personal journey, business-wise, financially, personally, and we develop a plan. That plan can be adjusted tomorrow or 10 years from now, whenever it's appropriate. So that's the biggest thing that we do. And again, in terms of having those discussions, it's just being proactive. I tell my kids this all the time, and I say it repeatedly so I can do it, and that's getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And a lot of these conversations can be uncomfortable just because it's personal, it's private, and that's just the way we kind of move and operate. But in order to alleviate some of that, really just having the trust in the fact that, hey, this is the best thing for my future is to really just try to open up and have a conversation. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to move forward and do business or not. It's just at least have a conversation to know what you're saying yes or no to. So to the first part, it's, anyone can develop a plan and really benefit from having a plan. It has nothing to do with whether you're, again, making $1 or $1 trillion. You just have a plan in place to where you know where you're going for you, yourself, your family, your business, and really have that legacy planning in place. And then as far as, small business owners and having those conversations, that it's just being open enough to have that conversation.
Yeah, and I think it ties into a little bit of what Marshawn said earlier about his own siblings, basically, using your own money to make sure that you're making more money. And I think that's what, in a lot of cases we're here for. Wise Financial, Northwestern Mutual, is to basically maximize what you have and how you can make what you have make you more at the end of the day. So that was a really great example by Marshawn earlier. I appreciate him sharing that. And it kind of ties into that question as well.
If I could jump in, recently I've gone through interviewing financial advisors, and one of the things that stood out to the one we ultimately end up going with was Black female. She's really been great for our family. She said, "Your journey starts now." I think so many times we feel like what we've done in the past and our mistakes that we may have had in the past, someone's going to judge us, right? And so we don't want to be open and with our kind of finances. And so that's really helped us, even in the way I look at my business too. It's like, we're here now. We're building from the future now. There's no judgment of what we've done in the past. And so I think that, our relationship with money is a really big thing of just how we even talk to our financial advisors, but even how do we talk to our siblings and to our family members about how to build this wealth. And so I think that that's really being able to look within yourself to get a comfortable relationship with money. And then these conversations just open up. You start learning about, ways to leverage credit, right? To buy assets that pay off your liabilities and all these things, like just basic conversations that really stem from our relationship with money, usually developed from our parents, right? That's sometimes good, sometimes bad. So I think that was real eye-opening for me, was just having someone assure me that this journey starts now, not judgment from what has happened in the past, was very helpful for me.
I love what you're saying, Brian, because for me, I came from generational poverty. So there was nobody to teach me about financial literacy. There was no one to teach me about the economic literacy that I see as separate and distinct from financial literacy. Economic literacy is understanding the big game. How does your regional economy work? What's going on there? How's your skyline changing? How's gentrification occurring? How's things moving around? How's wealth being made in my region? And how can I get into it? And then, of course, that personal understanding of financial literacy is understanding, how do I manage my own game? How do I manage my own finances? So when I start to generate income, when I start to generate wealth, when I get valued assets, how do I manage that? So having a coach that is financially literate, that can coach you, that can mentor you, that can work with you and teach you, that is key. But also understanding the big game, that's key too.
Yeah, and I think the other thing about a financial advisor, it's your personal, but Eddie, a lot of people in the business world that can help small businesses, right? Like, so it's about leveraging these relationships. So when the question asks, what are some small businesses that can do to start these conversations, talk to people who are having these conversations, and again, like, your financial advisor knows a lot of people. They know accountants, they know, tax people, they know a lot of people who can help you navigate all of this, because it can be overwhelming, right? Like this is a big conversation. So, there's a lot of resources that we have, but you have to be intentional on going out and asking people for help. And then on the flip side, being able to help people. And we talk a lot about in our business, ask questions to understand, not to judge, to really help people understand like where their situation is. And so as a business owner, I'll help any business. But I'm going to ask you questions again, just to understand where you're at. So I'm not speaking over your head or anything like that. And I think that's really important, especially when it comes to finances.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Everyone's making amazing points. I think two things. One of them we talked about, our historical mistakes that we quote unquote have made, and we don't necessarily want to share those. I played professional basketball for 12 years. I made plenty of mistakes financially, to where I think back now, I probably could have done a little bit better. I could have saved a little bit more. I probably didn't need to buy that, or whatever the case may be. But that's part of it, right? That's part of all of our own personal experience. I've read something a long time ago, and it stuck with me. Everyone is going through and has gone through something nothing about, right? So I try to make sure I respect those experiences, respect everyone's personal experience, whether it's currently, in the past, and obviously where they're trying to move forward to. And that's what we do here for sure. And Brian, you brought up another good point. I can't tell you, Frank can run off a laundry list of things that we do and try to assist clients with that has zero to do with financial business, zero. So that's a great question, or a great comment in terms of just using that network, especially when you're talking about small business owners, when they're looking for additional resources and people to contact to help grow their business and help see their, especially in this day and age when everyone's business has had to adapt in some capacity. I want to make sure I'm respectful of our time and make sure if anyone has any closing remarks, and we obviously want to take action steps in terms of providing resources to the folks that have listened in today and kind of viewing us. But first, anyone, Brian, do you have some closing remarks that you'd like to share with the people?
No, I just, my contact information is a resource. I'd love to meet people and learn more about what they're doing, how I can help, how my journey could help them. I'm really interested to stay connected to Mike and Marshawn, because they've only made me think about 20 other things that I would love to have conversations about. But I do think that it's a sense of how do we build our community, not so much for where we stand, but really where we stand within the larger community. Because we can all become selfish and try to just care about our own bottom line. But really, I think where we're going to make impact in our community is seeing how we can scale that efforts to help the bigger community, from all different generations on how financial literacy is so important, and really how it affects everything. And one thing that Mike said that I'm gonna steal Mike is this Team USA type of mentality, and how we can as a community be a part of that and really drive economic impact, not only for just our small little neighborhood, but really even our city, our state, and ultimately our country. So I think it's about getting outside of just what we're doing, and really how do we pitch in and help, our neighbors on the right and left of us to all become much bigger than what we even think we can be.
Mr. Brian Crider of We Are Right Hand, really appreciate you being here, and your participation has been fantastic. Frank, you have any closing remarks?
No, just once again, just wanted to thank everybody, for joining us today. I think obviously spoke on some of my experiences. Definitely a couple things that are passionate to me. Obviously, our gender and racial pay gaps across the country. And I was reading something the other day from the Civil Rights Act about 57, 58 years ago. And the quote that really stood out to me was, equal pay for equal work is still not a reality. And I think that's, it's a little bit unfortunate that that's still the case. But I think, the guys here on this panel, folks that are out there as resources can help move that needle forward. I think I've committed myself to doing what I can to help move that needle forward. I know Eddie has. I know these great gentlemen on this call have committed to doing the same. So I think the more we encourage others to help us and help ourselves and moving the needle forward, the better off we can be, in the next 57 years. So I think just doing whatever we can to keep sharing our stories, building networks for those that need it, and opening the door for more access is really important. So I'll leave you with that, Eddie. Thank you.
Mr. Frank Parker of Wise Financial, thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here and your contributions. Mr. Mike Green.
Well, I just want to share with everyone that our mission at the National Institute for Inclusive Competitiveness, which is NIICUSA.org, our mission is to increase the productivity, and Marshawn touched on productivity as a measure of competitiveness, to increase the productivity of our most vulnerable populations by 1% GDP in one generation. That's a very simple mission, but it's a hard thing to do. And it means that we have to prioritize the development and increasing the productivity in each region of the MVP. And there's currently no economic strategy in any region that prioritizes increasing the productivity coming out of your most vulnerable populations. If there are institutions, businesses, policymakers that want to develop an inclusive competitiveness strategy for any region, we're open to it. And then finally, I want to say that my wife and I realize that every time we have these conversations on a macro level, there's always that micro level where we have a fragmented society and people are willing and eager to build bridges, but they don't have a common ground understanding. They don't have a common ground knowledge. They don't have common ground information. And that's why we develop common ground conversations on race in America. And if you're interested in that, it's commongroundconversations.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mike Green. Really appreciate your contributions here today, a wealth of knowledge, and I hope all of our listeners have really gravitated to some of the data and then obviously some of those solutions. Last but definitely not least, Marshawn Woolley.
So Black Onyx Management is the name of my company. If you go to our values, what you'll see is accomplishership, which is the idea of taking action as it pertains to equity. Equity is being one of them, scientific rigor, community first, meaning that whatever we do, we're going to put the community first, particularly Black and marginalized communities. I mentioned scientific rigor. We also are concerned about equity matters, and scientific rigor, accomplishership. One of the other things that you'll see on our website is this idea that if you want something you've never seen before, you have to do things you've never done before. And so when you think about the work that we're trying to do, it's all things that we've not seen done before. And so that's what we're going to try to continue to do. This conversation was actually very helpful for me, from the storytelling comments to the planning comments to the comments about trusting and how to build trust and preparation. These are all ideas that I really appreciated learning from you all about, and hopefully look forward to working with each of you on some project down the road in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you all. I want to again thank Emil Ekior, InnoPower, collaborating and being able to put this on. Robert Shagog, obviously, for putting this out with the recorder, really utilizing a great platform there. I want to make sure I recognize Mark Wise of Wise Financial, the entire group, Frank Parker, Kelly Burley, Sarah Gowdy, myself really have had a number of different meetings and conversations about how we can pull this together. Northwestern Mutual has been backing us the entire time, so really appreciate everyone's support. I do want to mention, obviously, the viewers can see there's nothing but men on here, right? And this that wasn't intentional, but that is what we have right now, and it's something that we wanted to start this for Black History Month for obvious reasons. But when we started putting together the first panel, this is the panel that came to be, not for any intentional reason. I will say next month is Women's History Month. The entire panels, or all the panels, the entire panels, they will be nothing but women. Next week's panel, we do have women involved in that one as well, but just wanted to make sure we address that because this is an inclusive platform here. We want to make sure we're including everyone. But also be intentional about trying to provide resources for Black and Brown community that just haven't had the access and social capital. With that in mind, I will just let everybody know who's with us next week. Steve Jones, Dean for Professional Development, Director of Malcolm X Institute for Black Studies at Wabash University. Willis Bright, Chair of the African American Coalition of Indianapolis. Aaron Larimore, Senior Program Officer, Indianapolis of LISC. And Kiana Davis, President of African American Legacy Fund of Central Indiana. So really excited about next week's and really continuing this, pushing forward all the way throughout the spring and leading up to the InnoPower conference in the summertime. Want to make sure that we put that our contact details up one more time, Frank, if you had that handy.
Yes, sir.
We want to make sure that everyone that we're reaching out and having some of these conversations because that is what this platform is for. Again, that social capital is so huge in our communities. We just haven't had it. There's a wealth of knowledge here on this panel, as well as panels moving forward. So making sure at all times we're trying to utilize each and every one of these different resources that we have available for today. And like I said, moving forward. Again, I'll thank Frank Parker, Brian Kreider, Mike Green, and Marshawn Woley. Looks like Mike just brought in the MVP of the whole operation. Appreciate it. The little fella joining us. Oh, no, that's awesome. Well, again, I want to thank everybody for their time. Again, please reach out just to have these conversations and better yourselves and better our community.